Yo, what's up? It's your boy AT and your boy Lloyd De. Man, dude, it's been too long since we have been able to do a live stream together. I've had a couple of people come on my channel like, I miss Lloyd. I'm like, I miss him too. But man, you have been busy. You have been getting after it. You've been doing some really pretty incredible stuff in terms of obviously the Sharia things, which you're very well known for. But you've been digging a little bit deeper into kind of cults and how Islam is associated with a lot of cults, like Masonic stuff, and you'll be able to talk more about it because I'm not that incredibly versed. And you've been doing a lot into the Gnostic sects of kind of the Christianized Gnostic sects, and how that has been influenced into Islam as well, which is going to be the main point of our topic today. But before I even let you give an introduction, before I even let you say anything, you have to answer 3 questions. So pop quiz time, Mr. Lloyd. Are you ready? I think you might. There you go. Okay. So question number 1. What is more historically reliable? Writings of eyewitnesses living at the time and location of events, or people living generations later in distant lands?
I think we all know the answer is the magic number is you need to come 610 years later.
Okay.
Then you need to write paraphrased versions of previous stories to correct them. And I think we all know that this is the correct approach.
Yes, absolutely correct. That is 1 out of 1 for you so far, Mr. Lloyd de Jong. You are killing it, son. All right. Question number 2. I know this is nerve-wracking. Should you trust a book that says that it is from God when it tells you that sexual fluid gushes forth from between the backbone and the ribs, and that stars are really missiles hurled by Allah at invisible creatures? Should you
I have to
trust
say
that book?
that if the book had said that sexual fluid gushes between the nose and the toes, it would be 100% accurate,
Mm-hmm.
totally correct.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we should not be overly critical because there's a level of precision there that we should not just sniff at, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a reasonable degree of accuracy for very low values of accuracy, though. But
Yeah.
I think that generally between the front and the back, or between the top and the bottom, it's anatomically correct in a real sense. So I don't want to
Yeah.
get overly critical because
Mm-hmm.
because we want to give people the benefit of the
Well,
doubt.
and you
And I
wouldn't
think
expect God to be completely precise either. That would be a silly, silly thing for, the almighty,
we have
all-knowing, all-powerful God to be able to give precise definitions of things.
look, he is a 6th century god, 7th century. So let's cut him some slack, right?
Okay.
Let's cut this guy some slack.
You said
And
God
then of
is
course,
6th century?
with this particular deity, right? So
Yes,
so so
yes.
let's you know and besides, he was speaking for people who are not very complex. So we've got to consider the culture, the times,
Yeah, that makes sense.
and
Okay. So your answer is
small
yes.
words.
It's definitely a book that you should trust.
Well, think about it. We've all seen shooting stars. Now, the question that we never ask, because we have a bias,
Mm-hmm.
is that we never ask who's shooting those stars. See, they're called shooting stars. Someone is shooting those stars, and then also we have to ask shooting at what.
I
So,
think that's
I'd
true.
say that I'd say that there's reason for doubt here. We definitely need to consider this as a plausible hypothesis.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
so I don't know. Does that sort of, what does the audience think?
Yeah, I don't know, guys. What do you guys think? Go ahead and write in the comments here if you think that this is a book that you should trust as being from God or not. I have the correct answer, but I'm going to let the audience write in here for it as well. I'm going to give you half a point, Lloyd, because you just weren't as definitive as saying that yes, it's absolutely from God. I don't know why you wouldn't say that.
Well, if God was the author of the book,
Yeah.
then yes, it was definitively.
Okay.
Assuming God is one of the aliases of the people that wrote the book. His name might have been Jimmy,
Yeah.
and people just happen to call him, I don't know, pick a random name, Allah. Then
Oh
then yeah,
yeah,
then
yeah.
then,
Any
then
yeah.
Allah wrote it,
Mhm.
right? Ben Beal asks, is Lloyd South African? Yes, he is. He is South African. Is it true that Momo will return in Islamic eschatology? How will return if his body is rotting in Saudi? That, you see, don't confuse this off with the facts, because Mo will return. He comes back as the King Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah who foretold of the King Messiah, Muhammad, and he is the Shiloh. In fact, according to the, if you read the scholarly works, Muhammad is the Shiloh, which is foretold in Genesis 10, I believe, who will receive the scepter of power, and he will have authority at the end times over the judgment of people and the resurrection of the dead. So yeah, that's the role, which is obviously plagiarized from Christian eschatology.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean the Quran is just, I mean Muhammad was the prophet of plagiarism. The Quran is a Gnostic myth. I'm going to dig into that, and yeah, I think next year is going to be a very interesting year, because wait for it, wait for what's coming. Next year is going to be a very interesting year. And your
Be a
third
good
question,
year.
sir.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, I thought you were trying to skate around my third question. I appreciate you bringing us back on track. This one should be simple: true or false. Okay, this is true or false. This is not a subjective thing, by the way. It's completely objective. The best of mankind married his adopted son's ex-wife, then abolished adoption soon after. He also married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage with her when she was 9. And he, at the time, was 53 years old. So, true or false, that person is the best of mankind.
Now, I think you're putting the cart before the horse here. We need to go back to first principles. First, we need to define this word mankind.
Mm,
Okay? Because, see, mankind is made up of two words, mank and eind.
mm.
Okay? It's made up of the words mank and the word eind.
Eind.
No
Okay.
one no one knows what those two words mean. They're a mystery.
Mm, mm,
And so is the best of mankind.
mm.
I hope that clarifies.
Okay, yeah, because it's a mystery. So, Lloyd, you got. I'm gonna. You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and give you 3 points on that one. So
Thank you.
it yes, absolutely. It's more reliable. You were correct. It's more reliable to read things from people who know nothing about the events. We always know that
Well,
that's the
remakes are
most.
always better, right? The remakes are always better, right?
Remake is always better. I mean, Spider Man,
Ghostbusters, yeah,
Matrix, Dumb and Dumber. I mean, all these things are always better. Um,
remakes are always better. Remakes are always true to the original,
mhm, mhm,
right? You know,
yeah.
the all female Ghostbusters, that was authentic, 100%. I hope no
uh,
one's taking monsters seriously,
we're
right?
gonna get in trouble for that one. Well, we could talk about marriage of a 9-year-old girl, but you start talking about all female Ghostbusters, and someone's dinging us for that one. Oh man.
No, no, no. Like as I said, it's a mystery. We don't understand these things until we understand the meaning of mank and eind. This
Hmm.
is a mystery, and we shouldn't delve into mysteries because,
Right.
as you know, Allah knows best. It's
Well,
very
and
hard
the
for us.
more mysterious something is, the more true it is. Everybody knows that, right? Because a mystery is greater. It's Akbar. The more mysterious it is, the more Akbar it is.
Radio. That is true. There you go. So yeah, hopefully that clarifies everything. We're now, you know, um, so now people have learned about the mystery of Mank and Eind. I hope that was
Hmm.
helpful to the audience. Let's see if they've
Absolutely.
said anything fascinating. Uh, hello there, boomers.
Oh, they're talking about Jay Dyer always calls people boomers if they're older. You know what I mean? So that's
Okay.
funny. Anyway, jump
Okay.
into
So
it, man. I mean, if you want to say anything beforehand, go for it. But if not, let's get a groove
no.
on.
Okay. Well, so let me dive in here. So guys, this is not a dedicated presentation. Part of the reason I'm on with and I will repost this, give it a few days for your channel views to jump, and then I will repost it on my channel as well. So guys, yeah, Us Truth is very close to 1,000 subs. He needs 119. So last I checked. So guys, do sign up, right? Do sub and do give this video a like, and let's get AT up to 1,000. That'll be a really really nice achievement. I know how important it was for me. It was a really big achievement, and yeah, so let's help him get over that little hump, right? Nearly there. Okay, so I'm going to grab screen two. I'm going to share that, and I should be sharing right now.
You're up.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to jump through a couple of different sources, but I'm going to give you an intro to something I'm busy with. It may well change over the next couple of months before I'm ready to release this. But also, AT he gives his honest perspective on things, right? So I'm here to get perspective, to check my knowledge of this material, to see how well I'm presenting it, but also to get AT's feedback, because he's a good devil's advocate when it comes to analyzing data. Now, this is not the final form of the data. There's so much that I'm still going to be editing, but you're going to get a taste of this. So we're going to be talking about myths, about the Apocrypha. We're going to be talking about the Gnostic Gospels, plagiarism, and the copy paste Quran, right? So I am going to skip that. So we're going to be talking about the sources of Islam. And the major source of Islam is Gnosticism.
Nasty sauce.
Well, yeah, Gnosticism. I did think of the word. I just didn't want to put anything in the bottle, you know?
Mm.
So, but some of the things now, one of the important things, let me just change my, one of the important things to note is this book of Al-Kasai. This is something that you guys are going to have to, we're going to learn a lot about that. That's one of the very earliest sects that actually, but we'll get there. Ebionism, we're going to have to know about that. Manichaeism, certainly. The Talmud, the Targums, and other Jewish works, as well as the Apocrypha, especially the book of Enoch. That's going to get, over time, we're going to learn a lot about that. So those are the sources of Islam. Now, there are Quranic verses that mention Jesus' birth, some miracles, his crucifixion. I already have a number of different variations on the crucifixion story that come from the Gnostics, come from what I call pseudo biblical groups, which Islam has borrowed. And in fact, there's scholars. If you look through the Islamic scholars, just like I did for the Paul series, Islam versus Saint Paul, where you've got all of these crazy stories by different scholars about Saint Paul. Like Saint Paul was the king of the Jews, where they confused him with King Saul,
Mm.
right? That Paul committed suicide, right, to Jesus, things like that. That I mean, nutty stories like that. You'll find that the Islamic scholars tell the same about the crucifixion. They can't make up their minds. If you go through 10 scholars, you'll find 10 different stories about the resurrection, the crucifixion, and on all the events around that day. Okay, so all of these events, all of them bear close resemblance to sectarian texts dating as early as the second century. And when I say second century, I mean from like the year 100, 100, 120, in that range. So these are very, very early, okay? Early second century, late first century. Now, the Quran's narrative are not unique to the 7th century. I need you to understand that. We're going to find that just about every single story told in the Quran has an antecedent in some sort of pseudo biblical, Gnostic, heretical group. And the model for Islam in the Quran long pre existed in pseudo biblical texts and groups, many of which were extant, in other words, were existing in the 7th century. If you have anything to add, just drop in, AT.
No, so far I'm just, dude, mesmerized.
Okay, so now we'll talk briefly about the Prophet of Plagiarism. So this is a very, very interesting book. I recommend you all go out and get one. If you know how to use Google, you are golden. This is called The Original Sources of the Quran by William Tisdall, right? The edition that I'm using dates to 1905. He is a powerhouse of intellect from the 19th century. He and many other scholars, especially the British and the Germans, did some amazing work during that period. And then you've got some other guys from Eastern Europe as well. Now, the Quran mentions numerous biblical figures, yet many of its stories are not found in the inspired Jewish and Christian scriptures. The question is, where do they come from, right? For instance, were these their own elaborations of biblical stories, or were these elaborations of pseudo biblical stories from heretical groups? Now, Muhammad is the counterfeit Jesus, right? I've discussed that at length in the past. These are medieval Persian manuscripts. So here Muhammad leads Abraham, Moses, and Jesus in prayer. Notice the halo surrounds Muhammad's entire body, right? Whereas all of these other prophets only have a halo around their heads, right? So a number of stories in the Quran are plagiarized from earlier uninspired works. Jewish, heretical Christian, and Gnostic texts were all included and altered as well. Yeah. So the original texts include apocryphal gospels, the midrashim, the targums, and the Gnostic myths. And over time, within next year, I'm going to be identifying the sources, the multiple sources sometimes for the same story, or the original earliest sources, and trace them through history as they moved through different groups and geographies. So W. St. Clair Tisdall wrote a detailed study, The Original Sources of the Quran. I highly recommend that you guys look into that. by the way, just so you know, the Targum means translation. So the Targums were Aramaic translations of the Hebrew scriptures. Now, much of what the Quran alludes to comes from Aramaic. So this is an interesting historical connection, right? And often they're a loose paraphrase of an original story with additional commentary. I would think that we will discover over time that the Islamic authors of the Quran, right, of the Quran, sorry, the Quran, they might have added the commentary in as actual scripture. They weren't able to tell the difference between the actual substance and the commentary. For instance, Quran verse 532, which they and 533, this is ascribed to Allah, but actually it comes straight out of the Talmud, okay, from Talmud Sanhedrin, and it's written by Jewish rabbis. And the Quran says this comes from Allah. Your comment, AT?
Well, I think all the stuff you're talking about is going to and is already kind of making my head turn, and answers a lot of questions that we have, because when we do read the earliest Quranic sources, um, it just it feels, it sounds, it's fishy, right? You're like, this doesn't sound like it came from just one person or one entity or whatever it is. It sounds like a
Right.
mishmash of,
Correct.
different jigsaw puzzle pieces coming together in kind of a gross way.
Now, what's interesting, we've forgotten a lot of research that was done in the 19th century, in the early, well, the late 1700s, especially in the 1800s. Numerous scholars were taking this apart, taking Islam apart. They were translating on their own, and they were writing commentaries on this. And there's so much material written by these scholars, and all of them basically came to the conclusion Islam was a concoction from numerous different sources,
Mhm.
geographies, and so on. Times. Just briefly, the original source of the Quran. Get yourself a copy. Okay, so he tells us we learn the same lesson from all such investigations, and that is how completely Muhammad adapted his pretended revelations to what he believed to be the need of the moment. Don't forget, there is a hadith, right, that states where Aisha tells Muhammad, "It is you who pretend
Mhm.
to be a prophet from Allah." She tells him this to his face, right? So Muhammad's own character and disposition have left their mark upon the moral law of Islam and the Quran itself. So he adapted what he had, and of course he changed it to suit. So he stole, and then he adapted it to suit his
Well,
own needs.
and I think, if you don't mind going back, I'd like to read that
Sure.
again. So I think that those two statements that you highlighted there have really strong explanatory power for how and why the Quran is written the way that it is, and why the Islamic sources are written the way they are. Right?
Right.
This makes all the sense in the world. There was a man who wanted things to suit his needs at the moment, and somehow people have latched on to this, and they now like adopted what Muhammad wanted for himself, to thinking that that's what they need to do for the rest of their life. But literally, just with that statement right there, that kind of explains the whole of, at least what outsiders to Islam, this is what we see, this is what we notice, this is what makes
Right.
sense to us when we read the Quran or any other Islamic source.
Yeah. Before the broadcast, you yourself brought up this very story about the marriage of Zainab, whom
Hmm.
his adopted son Zayd divorced. So understand, he simply did things for his own convenience.
Yep.
So yeah, that's something that's well known. Now, we must not forget that Muhammad was never brought into contact with pure gospel Christianity. He may have had some exposure to a verse here, a page there, a chapter here and there. However, we I did find actually a late source, but it's after the death of Muhammad, a late source for, rather an earlier source for an Arabic version of the New Testament, which is earlier than the one that I've known. I've just discovered a new one,
Mm.
apparently. And but there were smatterings of this. But in fact, it was after the Quran became an established, shall we say, literary source, that Christians and Jews then started to put out their materials in defense against the Quran. And that led to this spurred this development of writing the whole books for the Christian and Jewish faith. So it is likely to the false forms to which the faith had been almost universally assumed that the rise of Islam is really due. And I agree with him there. Okay. So he founds this new anti Christian religion. So we'll get into some of those details. Now, Tisdall tells us there's no satisfactory proof that an Arabic version of the New Testament existed in Muhammad's time. and I'm busy unpacking all of that. Okay, so in the future I'll be discussing that, what was available. For
Mm.
instance, the Gospel of Matthew, right? There was a version, an authentic version of the Gospel of Matthew that was actually floating around, that had been taken into that area in the time. St. Paul actually went to Arabia for apparently 3 years, but there's no record of what he did there. Numerous Christian scholars went there, senior scholars as well. Numerous monks went there, right? And so we do know there was activity. However, a lot of the stories they passed on were oral. And we do know, short version, that there was a Gospel of Matthew that went to Arabia. However, we also are aware that at least three Gnostic, three three edited versions, right, three corrupted versions of that same Gospel of Matthew also appeared all over the Middle East as well. And it had been adapted to suit the tastes of these Gnostics. But that again is something for the future. Now, in the Orthodox Church, the gospel was neglected often, and I've got evidence for this as well, in favor of the legends of the saints, which appealed to the popular taste for the marvelous. This was due to the character of the Middle East, and I will be discussing again everything that I'm referencing here. I will in the future dig deeper. So they were the Jahiliyyah, the time. Thank you, XYZ. Thank you very, very much for that comment. Short version. The Jahiliyyah, the pagan period prior to the coming of, well, technically it's the condition of ignorance, not the time of ignorance, the condition of ignorance. Remember, so we are still, even in the West, we are still ignorant, not because the time of ignorance has passed, we are still in the condition of ignorance. But prior to that, since they had no form of writing, they didn't have writing in that time in Arabia. The only way to be remembered was through poetry, right? And the more dramatic, the more amazing the poetry was, the more it lauded someone's attributes and exaggerated about them, and told bold things about him, the more you were remembered. Understand? So the culture liked that kind of story, and that's something I will dig into again in the future. Arabia was a refuge for heretics of different sects expelled from the Roman Empire. So we know they were kicked out. Rome became a Christian nation, Christian empire rather.
Hmm.
These people were kicked out because they were troublemakers, and many of them ended up in Arabia. They also ended up within areas we now identify as Iraq and also Persia, and they traveled around, and many of them eventually made their way with their books into Arabia. So it is clear from the Quran that many of the mythical stories in the apocryphal Gospels, Enoch, we're going to touch on Enoch in the future. Yeah, a lot there. And heretical Gnostic works must have reached Muhammad and been accepted as true.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not going to go into much depth here. Just to remind you, the Jahiliyyah thing, this verse, shall we forsake our gods for a mad poet, from Quran 37:36. This is going to be very important. Why this is written is actually very important. And don't forget, they say tales of the ancient, which Muhammad has caused to be written, and these stories are dictated before him morning and evening. So they obviously he's trying to defend himself. But
Right.
again, these things are very, yep.
And do you find it kind of odd that the eternal, right, uncreated words of Allah would have such specific time-based statements? I've
That
always
is
found that to
very
be weird.
strange.
Yeah, right. So like you go back to the last couple of pages there and you see um statements about tales of the ancients, which is, so that means that that statement has been eternally said, and it has
Hmm.
nothing to do with Allah addressing a specific time per se, but like if you were just to read this, you would just think that Allah was just acting at a particular time for a particular people group,
Yeah.
and not that these words were completely eternal.
Well, remember what we said earlier about these within Jahiliyyah,
Mhm.
tales of the ancients. This is how they remembered the past.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. All of these clues, these are all clues, and my plan is to take these clues and expand upon them and provide specific historical and, shall we say, do a real deep dive into them, show you the history, the groups, the geography, the time, right, the books, the stories that are connected with each of these, where we can show where this comes from, why was it said, right, from the pre-Islamic period, right, within Arabia and outside of Arabia. Give you another example from the life of Muhammad. So this is the earliest supposed biography of Muhammad, right? It was he who said, Muhammad is all ears. If
Hmm.
anyone tells him anything, he believes it. So we have corroborating evidence within Islam's own sources,
Yep.
okay? That Muhammad was apparently, he lapped up these stories, right? And among them are those who torment the Prophet and say he is an ear. So this is corroborated within the Quran. say an ear that is good for you. That's all good for you, right? Now, sorry, I may have looked. There may be one or two small mistakes. I'm still busy with this. This might be Paul. This might be the Apostle Paul, but apparently Peter, the Apostle Peter, traveled to Arabia. I know
Hmm.
Paul went to Arabia for three
Yeah, I
years.
know Paul did. Yeah,
So neither went I up. I may have mistyped this. It's quite possible. So understand, this is very raw and rough material. This is
it's all
not
good.
in any shape
We
or
got
form.
Ben Beal in the chat. He will correct us if we need anything.
Yeah, yeah. No, look, this is yeah. As I said, this is a lot of it is it's still raw. I'm still. It'll be months before I'm done with this. Neither went I up to Jerusalem to them which were apostles before me, but I went into Arabia and returned again unto Damascus. Now we have no detail, but we do know that the apostles, at least one of the apostles, went to Arabia and spent significant time in Arabia. And I have a little bit of information of what may have occurred there, right? And let's look at this. Behold, are not these who are speaking Galileans? And how do we hear, each one of us in our own native language? Parthians and Medes and Elamites and those residing in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia comes up a lot.
Mhm.
Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya towards Cyrene, and the Romans who went on, both Jews and proselytans and Arabs. So notice that at the Pentecost, when the languages descended upon the apostles, they could all speak because they had to spread the word, the Great Commission. Notice that Arabs can understand them too. They were given Arabic,
Mhm.
which must imply that they were going to go into Arabia. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Okay. So yeah, when I'm done, I'll basically clean up all this and put in the proper references and all that. This is still very much a work in progress. So now, in the second century, Pantheonus of Alexandria traveled to modern South Arabia and found a Christian society that possessed a Hebrew version of the Gospel of Matthew that, according to Eusebius, had been left by the apostle Bartholomew. So now we know that fragments of the New Testament had been left in Arabia,
Hmm.
right? And now notice we've again confirmation from Muhammad's own biography, or rather, it's actually not his biography, it's his gospel. This is the gospel of Muhammad. From that very night, every one of them was able to speak the language of the people to whom he was sent. So these people are confirming the New Testament. So sometimes they affirm what we know as the true New Testament, and
Hmm.
sometimes I think they interpolate material, they add their own, and sometimes I think they are misquoting, and sometimes they are simply quoting accurately Gnostic, heretical gospels.
Right.
Okay? Those whom Jesus, son of Mary, sent, both disciples and those who came after them in the land, were Peter the disciple and Paul with him, and Paul belonged to the followers. And Bartholomew went to Arabia, which is the land of the Hijaz.
Okay, so
That's
he
an
went
interesting,
specifically to the land of the Hijaz, right? Because Arabia is a big place, so he went
right?
directly to kind of Medina, Mecca, and that general region.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that deep next year. Again, I keep saying that, but look, understand this is a very light overview. Um, but understand there's corroboration from within the Islamic sources. So somehow they had access to some of these sources. And now I want to bring up. I'm sorry, this is not a prepared slide. This is not ready. Okay. Technically, this was the very first slide, but I'm going to bring this up here. So understand, this is very raw. So I will just dive through. I want to give you guys. I want to get feedback. And AT, especially you, you're a very good devil's advocate. You always provide good commentary, but also ask good questions. And I mean, if you don't think something makes sense, I'm sure you'll say that. So that's why I want to do this with you, just to get your thoughts on this, right? To see if I'm just pulling rabbits out of a hat or if I'm actually making logical sense.
All right, I'll try to be as mean as possible.
Right. So, a non-canonical now, the Book of Al-Kasai. Now, this is very important. Okay, this is one of the earliest, one of the very very earliest, and it's critical. It's foundational, I believe, to Islam. It is foundational to the Ebionites. It is foundational to the Manichaeans. Now, Mal has been doing some fantastic work. Okay, Mal at Sneakers Corner, and Bala did some great work on the Manichaeans, right, discussing Manichaeism as the foundational root of Islam, and I believe I can show you what is the foundational root of Manichaeism. Okay, and add additional material to the Manichaean material that Bala presented, which fleshes that out and shows an even more depth and clarity just how Islam got its start within that. I'm not saying that Islam only came from that, but it's one of the major sources. So, the Book of Al Kasai, and I must thank someone in the chat one time or in the comments who sent me some information, who just made it. Man, I get some great info from you guys, so thank you. So, a non-canonical book now lost, which was referenced by Hippolytus in the Refutation of Heresies. Epiphanius, right, in his Panarion and Origin, contend that it was used by the followers of Al-Kasai, a heretical group known as the Alkasites. The Book of Al-Kasai was never widely authoritative in the early church period. Patristic, that's the early church fathers, identify the Alkasites as one of three groups of Jews who combined aspects of Jewish practices with Christian beliefs. The others are the Ebionites and the Nazarenes.
Mhm.
The Alkasites, who originated at the start of the 2nd century. When we say start, this book, there are some references to the year 98. So, in other words, the very end of the 1st century. And from the year 100, it was definitely in circulation and known by the early church fathers, right? And although there are some later references, but this could have been when it was most common. But also, there were more than one version of the book. There was a Greek version as well as, I believe, an Aramaic version. And so these came up in different areas. So some of the dates would be references to these, but I will get into that another time. So the Alkasites originated at the start of the 2nd century. They practiced rigid asceticism while emphasizing theosophical speculation. Think of the Madame Blavatsky Theosophy Society, same kind of nonsense.
Mm.
Now, the Book of Alkasai acknowledged a second baptism. Now, I want to note before I begin, many scholars, when they talk about the Alkasite, they talk about Baptists. They call them Baptists. They practiced baptism. However, what is interesting is, you see, we view things and we phrase things in terms of our own culture, our own experience. However, when you go to the Muslim sources to talk about them, they do not call them Baptists. The Muslim sources call baptizers. They call Baptists, right?
Mhm.
People who baptize because they know what the practice is and they identify it as this is baptism. However, the Muslim sources do not call this group Baptists. They call them people who do ablution, people who
Okay.
wash themselves.
I
Now,
thought you
your
were
thoughts
going.
on that, AT?
Yeah, I was thinking that you were going to head that direction with it, talking especially about the second baptism and whatnot. I figured you were going to go towards ablution, so I'm all ears. I'm all Muhammad.
Yeah. And they did daily ablution.
Hmm.
Okay. They did ablution for everything. So, without going into too much of this, I'm going to jump forward. So, the Book of Al Kasai, let's dig into that and see how far we get. I will try and bring up a couple of other sources as well. So, Parthia, this is very important. This is Persia. This is the area. This is part of the Fertile Crescent.
Hmm.
This is Persia, and Parthia is very important because lots of fascinating things came out of came came crawling on their belly out of Parthia, which is very very interesting, right? So now let's look at a slightly more. Arabia's down here. This is Arabia down here. Here's this would be Syria and Israel, and of course this here is the
Sinai
Egypt,
Peninsula. Yep.
Sinai Peninsula, and Egypt. Yeah, thanks. So this is a slightly more modern map, the Sasanian Empire. Now, very often you will hear references to Parthia. You will hear references to the Parthian Empire was the final Arabian Empire before the conquest by the Muslims. Okay, so because of this, that there's a crossover period in history, you will hear both names being used. So sometimes it's Parthia, but there was an overlap in history at that point. The Sasanian Empire, at its greatest extent, 620 under Emperor Khosrau II. The Sasanian Empire succeeded the Parthian Empire, being the last Persian imperial dynasty before the Muslim conquest in the mid 7th century. All right. So let's have a look now at this the life of Muhammad. And so we're looking at Gabriel, at Islam, in the book of Al Qasai. So again, from the life of Muhammad, he pressed me with it the third time so that I thought it was death. Okay, so as you know, Gabriel came to Mary, nearly choked her to death, and said, conceive. Or maybe it didn't happen like that,
I think it did
right?
actually, as I recall. So yeah, good point. The character of Gabriel is the same throughout the Old New Testament and in Islam. He's always choking people out, bro.
Yeah, he's always Actually, Gabriel, Jibril, Jujitsu, Jibril, am I onto something?
No, 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 no. You're not because it's gangster. He's the OG. He's the original gangster. He's the original
Jibril,
Gabriel, man.
Jujitsu, Jibril, choke out, tap out. Come on, man. I thought I
You
was onto
might be
something
onto
there, but
some. I'm not sure. We'll have to discuss
thanks for
later.
bringing me back. So he pressed me with it a third time and said, read. And Muhammad, illiterate as he was apparently, what then shall I read? It's like, of course, good sir, choke me again and I shall read for thou, right? That's how it works, right? It's like my teacher used to hit me with the ruler, but I don't know. So, and this I said only to deliver myself from him, lest he should do the same to me again. Read in the name of thy Lord who created man of blood coagulated. Read, thy Lord is the most beneficent, who taught by the pen, taught that which they know not unto men. That sounds like Dr. Seuss. How about you, AT?
It sounds like Dr. Seuss, and by far and away the worst scientifically. It is completely false. Blood coagulated. Is that what men are created by? Dead blood cells. Sounds good to me. And then, like, how does this speak to the all-knowing Allah to send the OG Gabriel to Muhammad to squeeze him half to death? Because obviously Allah knew all this was going to happen, knowing that he wouldn't read, or he didn't have the ability to read. Like,
Gabriel was
it's
trying to kill two birds with one stone, teach reading as well as practice his chokeouts.
okay, yeah, that's good.
Yep, yep. Remember, Gabriel's a fighting angel, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
So,
That's true.
so Muhammad says, "So I read it. How? What did he read?" Now, what is interesting? What did he read?
That's a great
Was there something,
question.
right? How did he read it if he apparently is illiterate? So understand. So there's a certain contradiction here and a certain bunch of questions. And he departed from me. Now, none of God's creatures was more hateful to me than an ecstatic poet or a man possessed. Woe is me, poet or possessed, never shall Koresh say this of me.
Mhm.
Now understand, this goes back to Quran 36:37 or 37:36, because it is common. Now again, back into the culture, and again, I'll explore this in depth. Within the culture of the Jahiliyyah, it was common that, again, poets were very important people. They had prestige. They were like magicians. They were like entertainers. They were like, they were very, very important people. And if you wanted to be remembered, you had to get on the good side of a poet so that they would write a song and write a poem about you and laud your, pardon me, your amazing deeds and speak about it. This was the only way because remember, desert people, sand, nothing to write.
Mhm.
Did Gabriel ID himself? Nathaniel, yeah, but don't confuse us with the facts, okay?
Right.
That's yeah.
And I will add to that, Arnold. So I've been doing a tremendous amount of research looking into the earliest Quranic sources, Islamic sources as well, about the identity of Gabriel. Whether he was an angel, whether he was a Holy Spirit, whether he was the man, and you might be surprised that Gabriel in the Quran is never identified as an angel, never
That is
identified
interesting. Yes,
either
yeah, I
as
listened
the
to this.
Holy Spirit. So, this idea that Gabriel was an angel typically comes through Christian understanding of the Bible, right? When we hear Gabriel, we automatically think Angel Gabriel. Um, but without the interpolation of translators, we would never know just
Right.
from reading the Quran that Gabriel, who's only mentioned 4 times, is even an angel, or if he's an angel. And in the Sahih Hadith, when Muhammad is speaking, he actually identifies Gabriel as a man, not as an
Interesting.
angel. Now,
And
Aisha identifies him as an angel, but Muhammad, when Muhammad is attributed to saying something, Muhammad every time says Gabriel the man. It's interesting.
and also the Quran makes a distinction between the Holy Spirit and the angels. It makes a distinct separation, and yet Gabriel is the Ruach al Quds. He is the Holy Spirit when necessary in Islam, and the rest of the time Muhammad is the Ruach al Quds, which is also
Yeah,
kind of weird. So that's a total contradiction, but okay, it's Islam we're talking about.
it is, right. But
Now,
that's where the Sharia comes into play, right? Because we can read the tafsir, we can read the hadith, we can read the Quran, which apparently is supposed to be crystal clear, and we can't really come to a consensus agreement on even something as simple as identifying the person who revealed the Quran to Muhammad, right? So, in
correct.
order for modern Muslims today to be able to look you dead square in the eye and say Gabriel is an angel, they have to rely on their scholars to interpret these things. But when you look at the original sources themselves, it doesn't actually say that.
Correct. Now, I will note that the idea of hanging around in caves, I will show you a reference to a group that used to do that. So every single thing that you see, every element of the story, all of these things that, and then he used to hang out in the caves, to make it dramatic. All of that stuff exists from previous sources. But back to the Jahiliyyah, the poets. Now, unfortunately, there's one interesting, sad little thing about the poets in the Jahiliyyah. All of them were demon possessed. all of them had a familiar spirit, a demon. And sometimes they had no choice. The demon would choose them, and the demon would invade them and use them. And the worse the demon, the nastier, the more evil the demon, the more powerful the demon, the better your poetry.
Hmm.
Okay?
So the
Yeah.
jinn or the demons are the ones
The jinn,
who
the jinn.
give you the
Yeah, the
ability for
jinn.
poetry. You know, that's a lot like modern day musicians, right? They sell their soul to the devil, and then they have these incredible talents and skills and stuff like that. So, there you
Well, don't
go.
forget, when you say the Shahada, you the Shahada has there's a thing called Baya. This is where you give allegiance, right? So once you said the Shahada, you have this allegiance. Now, understand that you sell, you contract something with God, right? You make a
Hmm.
contract. You give him your soul, you sell him your soul, and he gives you worldly things. Don't forget, that's in the Quran. I've covered that in the past. I
Right.
will cover that. I just covered it on Friday, but I went through the verse on that. And so it actually is a contract of sale. It has commercial overtones. Okay, the Shahada has commercial overtones. Baya, this allegiance has commercial overtones of a sale. Understand? And it's only with Satanism that you sell your soul to the. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
that's a very good point.
Right. Now, understand, he says, I will go to the top of the mountain and kill myself. I will throw myself down that I may kill myself and gain rest. So he's very unhappy. But notice this thing on the bottom here. Gabriel in the form of a man with feet astride the horizon. So he says, I raised my head towards heaven to see who was speaking, and lo, Gabriel in the form of a man with his feet astride the horizon. So his feet went from horizon to horizon.
Hmm.
Okay. Now that is interesting. Let's continue with that. And he said, I raised my Gabriel in the form of a man. And he said, Muhammad, thou art the apostle of God, and I am Gabriel. And I began to turn my face away from Gabriel, but towards whatever region of the sky I looked, I saw him as before. Gabriel was so big, covered so much of the sky, the horizon, that wherever Muhammad looked, this massive, massive angel was everywhere. Let's continue. Narrated Aisha, he only saw Gabriel in his genuine shape in which he was created, covering the whole horizon. Aisha tells us this, and we don't want to call Aisha a liar now, do we? AT.
Yeah, no, no.
Right. It was Gabriel in his actual and real figure. He was so huge that he covered the whole horizon. That is Da'if Bukhari 3234 and
Yep.
3235.
Always Daif. We can
Otherwise,
never trust Bukhari.
exactly, it's Da'if Bukhari, otherwise known as Book 59, Hadiths 45 and 46. And you can see the references down here,
Hmm.
right, as well. Now, where else did that story come from? Well, there's only one other major historical source, okay, that discusses an angel of massive size. Now, I'm going to exclude from for the moment the Book of Enoch because the Book of Enoch inspired a lot of weird stuff. But we need to now look at the Book of Al-Kasai and talk about its heresy. Some
Hey,
of the
before
sources
we
I
get
have
to
on
there,
top.
can I point something out that's interesting?
Sure.
Do you mind going back a couple slides to what Aisha said?
Right.
So whoever claimed that the Prophet Muhammad saw his Lord is committing great fault, blah, blah. He only saw Gabriel in his genuine shape, right? So Gabriel's genuine shape, and Aisha here is saying that he only saw Gabriel in his genuine shape. And his genuine shape is
In the
so
cave,
large. Yes,
how
you're
did
going
something
there.
that covered the sky fit in the cave?
Thank you. That was
Good
my
point.
point, right? So, like, someone please explain this to me because I don't know what's happening.
Oh my gosh, are we going to have to call the little girl a liar after all?
They would love it if she was a liar. That would eliminate a lot of their issues.
All right. So yeah, but that's a very good question. Okay, you saw him in his actual and real figure, this massive giant. So now let's talk about this, the story of a book. So the Book of Al-Kasai is the story of a book that was sent down from heaven by an angel. In this case, a massive angel, and it is copied from the story of Al-Kasai from Parthia of northern Iran. And notice Hadith writers happen to borrow local myths from that area. Now, the Book of Al-Kasai, also known as Al-Kasaios, Al-Kasai, Al-Tsaios, Al-Shai, Al-Kasite, Halkasite, and a couple of other names, is a lost prophetic text. Technically, it's a Jewish apocalypse from Babylonia, dated to roughly 116-117, although there are earlier dates for it. Written during the reign of Emperor Trajan, who lived from 98 AD, who ruled up to 117 and died. It contains law and apocalyptic prophecies pertaining to messianic which is Christian, Jewish, as well as pagan and Gnostic doctrines. In other words, it's not just one thing or another, it's a mishmash of the whole bunch. It is known from early Christian writings of Hippolytus of Rome, Eusebius, Epiphanius of Salamis, and Origen. They only mention this book in context of heresies. The Alkacites promised remission of sins to all those who listened to the reading of this book and believed in it. And Epiphanius sighed, "We Muslims never claim that the Prophet has seen Allah but is allowed to see the angel. What is your problem?" It's a
Did
very
did we
large
ever
angel who
say
covers the
that?
sky. Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you ever say that we were talking about God in this situation?
No, we were not. We were talking about
Okay.
Gabriel.
Hey,
He's just
Yahya,
trying to
try to
distract.
pay attention, bro.
Yeah. So Epiphanius explains that the origin of the name Al-Kasai is Aramaic, Hayel Kasai, meaning the hidden power, right? Now, Origen called them religious propagandists, and we have to note that the main meaning of dawa is propaganda. Don't forget, dawa has Arabic words have multiple meanings. Dawa means propaganda, sorry, and pretense. It also means to call, but it's in, hey buddy, how's it going? Want to come over for a beer? That's a call. Understand? It does not mean evangelization. Get that out of your head.
Hmm.
Okay? But it means it's propaganda for the purposes of establishing a caliphate, an Islamic state. Appearing in the Christian churches in Palestine reported that the Halkassites made selective use of the Old Testament and the Gospels. Selective use. Do you know any group that makes selective use of the Gospels and New Testament,
Every heretic of all time,
including
and
Islam, just
perhaps
by the way?
perhaps Islam might be in that
Perhaps.
group.
Well, Origen and Hippolytus tell us that they rejected the Apostle Paul entirely. Do you know of a group that rejects the Apostle Paul?
Well, I mean, you could say Islam rejects Paul. I would say most modern Muslims do reject Paul, but there are some writings from early Islamic sources that do actually say that Paul was an apostle, not of God, by
True.
the way, and an apostle of
But then this
Jesus.
it says he was a follower. It says that he was sent by Allah. I mean, that actually does say he was sent by Allah. But Islam rejects Paul today, right? The Orthodoxy right now today, and the
Yep.
Alkacites claimed that their book had come down from heaven, right? And
Hmm.
according to Origen, the Alkacites declared that in case of emergency, Alkacites could deny their faith, provided that they only denied with their mouth and not in their heart. Does this
Sounds a
sound
lot
familiar?
like Islam.
Yeah, it sounds very lot like, and this is just three things that match. Understand? Well, four, technically four, that they made selective use of the Old Testament and the Gospels.
Yeah.
Now, Islam has a vendetta against St. Paul, right? See my show called Polemics. Allah has sent down the book from heaven by an angel. Oh my gosh, they also had a book sent down from heaven by an angel. My golly. We'll get into the angel in a minute. In Quran 16:106, one who is forced to renounce his religion while his heart is secure in faith.
Hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's you're opening my eyes here, because just this is Islam. Like Islam is just a bunch of heretical views piecemealed together, essentially, right?
Yeah,
Um, and it's definitely not Orthodox Christianity. Where nowhere are
correct.
we supposed to renounce our faith to remain alive, because we actually have this idea that the greater life is in heaven with God, and without 72 see-through, big-breasted, hoary, perpetual
White,
virgin women.
white women, white women,
Well, they're
white
so
women.
white,
Don't
they're
forget.
translucent, bro.
No, no. Technically, houris means white women.
Hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
that's the technical meaning. It's white women, not black women, not brown women, white women.
Well, it makes sense since Gabriel was the OG. He liked the white women.
Where are the white women at? Right. Yeah. Moving forward from this now. So understand. So let's continue here. Now, the angel of Al-Kasai and a Jewish text called the Shur Kama. It had been revealed by an angel whose height was 96 miles and whose girth was 16 miles. From shoulder to shoulder, he was 24 miles. His footprints were 14 miles long, right? The width of his footprint was 4 miles. His feet were 4 miles wide, and his footprint, the depth was 2 miles deep. With him was a female whose dimensions, he said, was the same as that mentioned. And the male was the Son of God, and the female was called the Holy Spirit. Now, I've put that in there, but that's relevant. But the angel was 96 miles high, 24
Mhm.
miles across, with feet 14 miles long, 4 miles wide, and 2 miles deep.
Sounds a lot like Gabriel, doesn't it?
that massive angel that covered the sky.
Yeah, but
This
also
is
fit
the
inside the
only.
cave.
Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, well, he also fit inside the cave too. So he's this massive angel fitting inside of a tiny cave space, apparently, making this poor
Well,
gentleman almost die.
I don't want to give you a spoiler, but it was basically it's the TARDIS. It's Doctor Who.
Hmm. Oh,
It's
geez.
bigger
Yeah,
inside
you
than
did.
outside.
Okay, that makes okay. Huh.
So now the Shur Kama, okay, titled "The Dimensions or the Measurements of the Body," is a midrashic text that is part of the Hechelot literature. I'm not getting into that right now, but basically the Jews wanted to figure out the dimensions of God, the body parts of God. Okay, you might know Allah. They figured out Allah has a shin. I don't know if they have much beyond that. If he has one hand or two hands, if he has one huge hand or two hands, and both hands are right hands. Remember, the Muslims got that far, but the Jews try to make a little bit of a more detailed story. Now, understand, you're going to find that you're going to have Jewish literature or Christian literature that has detail, and then you're going to have a paraphrase within the Gnostics. It's paraphrased. Detail has gone missing. They
Hmm.
might have added something, but the detail's gone missing. The story becomes fuzzy. And then you get to Islam, and it's the same story, even fuzzier. And they've added some other nonsense on the back. So basically, so they want to record in anthropomorphic terms the secret names and the precise measurements of God's limbs and parts, God's corporeal limbs and parts, that God is a body. And the majority of the text is recorded in the form of sayings or teachings that the angel Metatron revealed to the sage Rabbi Ishmael. And this was between, this period is between 10 and 220 AD. Okay? 10 AD, 220 AD.
Hmm.
And he transmitted it to his students. So this is the measurements of the body. And this actually comes back to us when we get to Mani, you get something similar, but so the book of Al-Kasai. Now let's talk about his apostle Alcibiades, right? The conclusion is that the Alkasites had a Jewish Christian background based in Syria. That's to put so we know that they came from Syria. They had should we call it a pseudo-biblical background.
Mm-hmm.
So the book of Al-Kasai is also an exegetical analysis of Song of Songs 5:11-16 as the love between God and Israel, and proclaims that anyone who studies it is guaranteed a portion in Olam Haba, the world to come. Now, the book of Al-Kasai says that anyone who reads this will be saved and will go to paradise,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And he'll understand the parallels here. And the thing is, when you stack up hundreds of parallels, it just like can't be coincidence.
Right. Which you're doing really
Now here,
well, and Muslims will tell you that they find Muhammad in Song of Psalms 5:16. So there you go. That's totally
of course, they
Muhammad
do.
in there.
Correct, Mahmadin. But he alleges as to those who have been involved in every description of lasciviousness and filthiness and in acts of wickedness, if only any of them be a believer, that he determines that such a one on being converted and obeying the book and believing its contents should by baptism receive remission of sins. So yeah, that is what Hippolytus writes in the Refutation of All Heresies about what Alcibiades taught about the book of Al-Kasai. Okay. And let me see. This is relevant because this may or may not be. So partly, this also takes things out of the Psalms. The height of the Creator is given as 236,000 parasangs based on a numerological interpretation of Psalm 147:5 as the height of our Lord is 236. So understand this is an exegesis of phrases within. Now, the Hechelot literature is not to be taken literally. It's mystical. It's
Hmm.
mythical,
Okay.
right? So they've taken this, they've exegeted these ideas and figured out. So if God were human, if he was corporate, what is the size of his limbs? So they've taken some of these ideas and they've been extended. And the Book of Al-Kasai takes these and now gives you precise measurements, right? And you can see more precise measurements within the Shur Kama as well. So in the second half of the second century, a Hellenized version of this speculation is to be found in the Gnostic Marcos description of the body of truth. Now we just had the description of the body or the measurement of the body for the name of the Shur Kama of that chapter. And now they speak of the body of truth. There also exist a number of Gnostic gems, like the Hebrew fragment of Shur Kama, where the figure of a man is limbs are inscribed with magical combinations of letters, obviously corresponding to the secret names, okay? And a clear reference to this doctrine is found as early as the Slavonic Book of Enoch. I have seen the measure of the height of the Lord without dimension and without shape, which has no end. So this idea of a very large angel, right? So a very large God, a very large angel, starts in Enoch and then makes its way through this Jewish mystical literature, this mythical literature, and eventually becomes codified in in the book of Al-Qasai. Karl Marx says if a Christian seriously argues that since Quran says God has body parts and it makes God composite, the Christian hasn't read the Bible. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Do you want to explain? What are your thoughts on that, At?
Let me pull this up again so I can read it. So if a Christian seriously argues that since the Quran says God has body parts, that it makes God a composite, the Christian hasn't read the Bible. I don't know, Kyle. Do you want to explain what you're trying to say there?
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
doesn't like. Okay, back to Book of Al-Qasai, right? Back to Alcibiades. So Hippolytus focuses on the teachings and activities of Alcibiades, who is from Apamea in Syria. This is a little bit, you just covered that there, but that's just a little bit
Yeah,
of
I
the
moved it.
ruins of it today. Yeah. So he points out a Jewish Christian element and that Alcibiades believes Christians had to be circumcised and they had to follow the law of Moses. Now, of course, we know that Paul abolished circumcision, said that, look, that's a Jewish practice. We're not trying to be Jews, we're trying to be Christians. Circumcision of the heart, etc., etc. And
Mhm.
also, don't forget, according to Roman law, you can only be circumcised if you were a Jew. If you circumcised yourself and you were not a Jew, you would get into serious legal trouble with the Romans. So this was not allowed. Right? There's a historical component that Islam forgets. And so also, Islam claims that you must be circumcised, and they claim to be following the law of Moses. They claim that we fail to follow the laws of Moses.
Mhm.
So, two parallels. Alcibiades stated that a certain righteous man, Alcasar, had received the book from the angel in the town of Serai. Epiphanius, he, the author of the book, was of Jewish origin and his ideas were Jewish. There's numerous references to this is clearly stolen from Jewish sources. And we can go into further depth, and I just wanted to bring up the relevant sections where you can see Jewish sources that echo all of this, where they stole these ideas. And there was an unknown Alcasad missionary in Palestinian Caesarea in 247 AD. So these guys went on for centuries. So Hippolytus refuted Alcibiades' claims that the book was a secret writing. Forgive me if it's too small. This is all a work in progress. So now, similar enormous angels are described in 3 Enoch, such as Metatron, but Alcasai is particularly describing Christ and the Holy Spirit. So they claim that, of course, the large angel is Christ, which is male, and the Holy Spirit, which is female.
Mhm.
I will note that if you go back again into the Jahiliyyah, into what the Arabs believed, they believed in two major gods as well, one male, one female. There were two gods of the Arabs, which I'll get into in the future. Two gods, and here you've got this idea of two major gods. Well, angels, but they became gods within
Right.
the
Right.
Arabian context. So Al-Qasai is said to have transmitted the book to the Sobiai. This is now taken to mean the Sabians.
Hmm.
And in fact, yes. And also, what's interesting is that Muhammad, if you look, there's a handful of hadith. I need to thank one of my subs as well, who's spoken to me about this. There's a couple of hadith where they say, where some guy says, "I've come to find Muhammad," and then people ask him, "The Sabi? You mean you want to speak to the Sabi?" And the Sabi is an Arabic reference to the Sabians. Muhammad, in those references, in those 3 or 4 hadith, is called a Sabian.
And that's interesting too. Yeah, because I mean the Christians, the Jews, and the Sabians are the three groups
People of the book.
besides Muslims that are somewhat revered. Yeah.
Correct. And notice that the Christians, the Jews, and the Sabians are
Hmm.
called the people of the book.
Right. So
Now think about
Muhammad
it. The
had this
Sabians,
idea. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
sorry, Christians, Bible, right?
Hmm.
Jews, Bible. Sabians, Gnostic Bible.
Right.
People of the book. People of the book.
Hmm.
Muhammad was a Sabian, apparently,
Yeah, and
possibly.
I never knew that. That is new information to me.
Right. So yeah, I'm digging into all of this. So the Bible describes God as having an arm and a right hand, the literal sense that God is, but God is what they signify, power and strength. Yeah, agreed. I mean that it's not literal, it's metaphorical.
Yeah, so a lot of it
Certainly
has to
it's
do
metaphorical.
with the different sects of Islam. So some of them do understand these things to be more metaphorical, whereas I can't remember the exact name. The Salafis believe that these descriptions of their Allah are literal. So it really depends what kind of Muslim that you're talking to. So it wouldn't be a good argument, Kyle, which I think is the point you're trying to make, to bring that up to a Muslim. It would be a good argument if you're bringing it up to a Salafi, but it wouldn't be a good argument otherwise. So thank you for pointing that out.
All right. Now, again, you guys can't read this very well. I'm just going to go through this just to mention this again. So, so Alcasai transmitted the book to the Sabians, right? Today we call them the Mandeans. They exist today still, right? Now, the Mandeans, the Mandaya, is a Babylonian Aramaic word in dialectic form meaning Gnostics of all things.
Huh.
Yes. In fact, it means Gnostikai, those who are good at knowing. and the Hebrew for knowledge is Mndada, Mada, Mada, Mandians, Mada.
Huh.
Okay, so it is of the same root and is the noun from which the adjective Mandaya is derived. So Mandians, Hebrew Mandaya, knowledge, Gnostics, Gnostici, Mandeans, Sabians.
Wow.
So make of that what you will. I should also note Hippolytus states that the baptism for the remission of sins was inspired by a dogma of Bishop Callistus. He had major arguments with Callistus, who went heretical, then sorted himself out, and apparently went off the rails again. And this is now he suggests that this baptism was not part of the book's message. So you would get baptized on a regular basis, daily, in fact. But you could be baptized because you were a bad boy. No confession, do the baptism, Bob's
Right,
your
just
uncle,
like
move on with your
ablution. Yeah, exactly.
life. Exactly.
Syrian Christian asked you. He said, "I heard that the Sabians called Adonai the God of the Old Testament, aka the devil, but he's not completely sure. Do you know if that's true or not? Or
Sabians called another god of the Old Testament the devil. Okay, look, I may misunderstand you here, so let me fill in some details that I'm busy on. Again, this is all work in progress. I don't know. Look, when you speak about the Sharia, I know that stuff largely off the top of my head, as you guys know. This is new to me. I'm still busy. As you can see, this slide is unfinished. It's raw. I've got even worse slides than this. So, short version. The Sabians claim, okay, assuming you're right, I don't know for a fact. I prefer to have my notes in front of me to speak, but let me say the following. John 8:44, for you are of your father the devil.
hmm?
Now, many Christians, everybody, a whole bunch of weirdos and wackos will claim that the Jews are evil. They have a strong hatred of the Jews. The Gnostics hated the Jews. The Gnostics had a thing for the Jews. They definitely were not fans. They would steal everything from the Jews. Now, they would plagiarize everything that wasn't nailed down, but they hated the Jews because there is they would claim that Jesus did not say when he was speaking to the Pharisees, specifically to that group of Pharisees. Remember, Jesus was a Jew, so therefore they also have to claim Jesus was not a Jew, right? They would have to claim he wasn't part of that. His mother wasn't a Jew, etc., 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 right?
Uh-huh.
But they claim that Jesus did not say, "You are of your father, the devil." You are of your father, the father of the devil.
Mm.
You are of your father, the father of the devil. Not you are of your father, the devil. You're of your father, the father of the devil. You are of the father of the devil. Does that make sense to you? Can you understand the
Um
implications? You are of the father of the devil. Does this make sense to you? Can you
yeah,
connect the dots?
so basically the god of the devil is
You
who
are
is their
exactly.
father.
And who do they worship? Who do the Jews worship?
Uh the god of the
Yahweh.
devil or Yahweh, yeah,
The
but so
Jews
they're
worship
so that's
Yahweh.
okay, so you're drawing the link between Yahweh
And
and
if Yahweh
yeah.
is the father of the devil, then Yahweh is evil. Therefore, Yahweh must not be followed. Therefore, Yahweh is greater than the devil.
Mhm.
Yahweh is the father of the devil. This is because they mistranslate the Greek, be it accidentally or deliberately. They will mistranslate the Greek of John 8:44. That is the root source for many Gnostic sects. It's taken me forever to find that.
Yeah. But it
Okay.
makes sense. And you know, it's
Christology,
funny. Yeah. And I get,
yeah.
just responding to the last part of that, I get messages every once in a while from people who are basically explaining to me that Yahweh is the devil. And I never knew where their concept came from until just right now. So thank you for clearing that up. Yeah. So Islam
You're
Defender
welcome.
Yahya. I'll take this one first, Lloyd, if that's okay, and then you can respond after that. Can
Yeah.
someone respond to how God looks like in the Bible, Revelations 1:10 through 16? Yeah, yeah. If you were listening, which I know that you weren't, and I know that you probably never have been listening, I've already answered that question to say that we take this metaphorically. Have you ever actually read the book of Revelation, Yaya, or do you just get your arguments from Ahmed D. Dot and just regurgitate them? The the book of Revelation is highly metaphorical, highly visual, as in their representations of spiritual realities and not of literal realities. So no, no, just no. Yeah, yeah, no. Lloyd, I didn't know if you wanted to add on to that or not, man.
No, no. So just to finish the point about John 8:44. So in other words, if Yahweh is evil, then Yahweh's laws must be broken. Yahweh's laws must be inverted. The morality of Yahweh is then the morality of Satan. Understand? And therefore you must break every one of God's laws. Okay, because obviously he's the father of the devil. He's even worse than the devil. So therefore, anything he says, his 10 Commandments in the Jewish Bible are evil. Muhammad broke all the 10 Commandments. Why? He's doing righteousness because Yahweh, the Christian God, is evil. Jesus, according to Islam, is the beast of Revelation. Understand? What did Chris say there?
Where did I? He just said, "What is your concern about the figurative description disclosed in a dream to the Apostle John?"
Let's
Right
not get
again.
distracted by that fool. I
Yeah.
mean, seriously, Yaya's. I mean, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'll wind down and I'll jump into something else to show you some other works. But I just wanted to introduce this just to see that I've got a handle on this. That again, raw slides still getting there. Now notice this is the Greek. Sorry, this is Hebrew. Okay, this is Hebrew, and these are two lines from the Shir Kama, if I recall. Now, Alcazar's historicity is considered certain. Okay, his book ends with a prophecy of imminent eschatological war, but those who pray a secret Aramaic formula will be saved. Now, do note, Muhammad. There are numerous hadith where Muhammad claims that a war will come, that the end time. Remember, Muhammad does claim the end time will come within his lifetime or within their lifetime, and it
Hmm.
doesn't happen. And people think, okay, you're a dweeb. Remember that?
Oh yeah, I do remember it. Is
Yeah,
somebody wouldn't live long enough in order to basically outlive
correct,
when the end was going to come, and he put his fingers together, essentially saying, "My life and the end times are this close together," meaning it's
correct.
happening as we
No,
speak.
I don't have those references. Look, I have the references, just to have them in the slides. I'm not going to put them in. This is all for the future. But understand, Muhammad makes the claim that the end times is going to come within their lifetimes. It's imminent. Notice the same. Al-Qasai makes the very same claim. Muhammad repeats it. Al-Qasai makes the claim, in theory, I believe it's within 3 years. Now, this is supposed to be a book that gives hope to the Jews because this happened during a certain period of warfare with the Jews. They were on the losing side to the Romans and they needed hope. And it seems that the book, to some degree, tries to give them hope and says that, the end times will come and you will find salvation and blah, 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 blah. So it's some kind of something to do with that. But moving on. Now, the words that you must speak, Abar Aned Moib, Nochil Dasim, Aned Dasim, Nochil Moib, Aned Abar Silam. Okay, those are apparently the words. And it says, now I'll read this: I bear witness to you on the day of great judgment, or I will testify on your behalf on the day of the great judgment. These secret words here, okay?
Hmm.
These are the known secret words. Now, people have struggled for a long time. Then in the 1960s, I believe it was. Okay, I'll mention it here. Now, notice this. Do you see Shahada parallels here?
Just
I
in
bear
terms of
witness
like
to you.
the testifying, yeah. I mean the words "I testify" blank, yeah.
And so, I testify, and then you will be saved. So if you testify, then you are saved. Understand? This is what it states.
Hmm.
If you make the testification of faith, you will be saved. Islam does make a very similar statement.
Yeah, and
If you make the
one of the
test,
things they say, I'm not sure I see 100% a parallel with the Shahada, but
true.
what I do
Well,
see is over and
yeah,
over and over again, the Quran basically saying that you must believe, right, in Allah and the last day, right. So the last
correct.
day
Now,
aspect, I see that as a
now
very
this is a
direct
reference to the
parallel.
last day, and if you believe this, and if you make the testification of faith,
Hmm.
if you believe in the statement, right, then you will be saved. Understand?
Right.
This is a very much. Do you see a much clearer parallel now with the Shahada and the Islamic belief?
Well, I do see that, right, because it doesn't say exactly what they're bearing witness to. So Muhammad
True.
just kind of extrapolated it and said, I bear
Yes.
witness that Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. And then if you believe
Where's that
that,
last
then
line
you
in the
will be
Quran
saved.
that Muhammad is his prophet? Which page is it in the Quran in those words? If
It's, yep, not
if
there.
if Yahya can help us out, if Yahya can help us out, the whole, and Muhammad is his prophet, that whole double shahada. If you can show me in the Quran in those words, I'd be happy to see it. Just drop it in the chat right now. We'll be happy to see that. Thanks, buddy. Now, notice this is a reference to 1 Enoch 91:15. So this is an extrapolation.
Hmm.
It's a plagiarism of and a paraphrase of. Can you understand? There's not like it's look. The fax machine wasn't invented yet. The internet was a little bit slow back then. Okay, paper, a little scarce on the ground. So it wasn't. You had a case of broken telephone. You didn't have a case of here's your CD. Look after this thing. Okay, okay, all right. Don't get dust in it. Don't scratch it, because understand, things were told by word of mouth. They were paraphrases. People manipulated the data to suit their own agendas. But there are certain very clear parallels here that could well have made their way straight into Islam. Now, Hekla text, okay. Now notice when I use Heich and sometimes I halkasine. What I'm doing is I'm utilizing numerous of the different spellings for these words that you see across different scholarly works, just to show people, look, it's not spelled only one way. There might be 5, 10 different ways of spelling it. I'm just using them all whenever it's convenient, just get that. Now, Hekkelot text recently published by Grunwald. So they speak of the Geniza manuscript, and it's judged to be from the 11th century, and its text is later than the Lesser and the Greater Hekkelot from which it cites. But it derives from the genre of Merkava, mystical, okay,
Mm.
literature. The Merkava literature obviously spawned the later 16th century spiritual movement. What was it called? Kabbalah. Kabbalah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Merkava is the original root of the uh, Kabbalah, right?
Hmm.
And notice it says here in 47 and 48, mention my name and call me in a low voice, and no creature will do him harm nor reach him. Don't forget, they claim that if you say these words, you will be saved. So this is a paraphrase of this, which is the original Merkava. Mention my name and call me in a low voice, and no creature will do you harm or reach you. Your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I mean, call my name, Allah, right? And then no creature will harm you. Are you going to get into the similarities between a lot of this and Sufism at all, or is that in a different thing?
Not today.
Okay,
Not today. That's too much. Sufism is a subject of
it's a
its
whole
own.
other.
It
Yeah, I figured
is.
so.
Sufism is nuts. The Sufis are, man. Actually, hold on. I'm going to bring up something. I'm going to bring up something here. 1 second. Since we are here, I'm just going to bring up something. Uh, Got it. Here we go. Every 60 seconds, I have a new desktop background that shows up. I'm just going to give me 1 sec. Okay. While we're here, this everyone is a Sufi story. The Byzantine soldier revealed his face, and it turned out that he was a friend of the Sufi who had spent many years with him following the Sufi path in worship, but he had apostatized. And the Sufi told him, do not do this, return to Islam. And the Byzantine soldier, the Christian, said, no, I will not do this. I have a high rank and great wealth amongst the Byzantines. Go away, or I'll do to you what I've done to these three. And the Sufi responded to him, saying, you have already killed these three Muslims, so there will be no blame on you if you depart, and I will give you time to retreat. So as the man began to retreat, turning his back, the Sufi rushed after him and stabbed him to death. Now, as you know, Sufis are from the religion of peace, warm yellow peace, right?
Uh-huh.
So now understand, I can show you another reference. I won't do it right now. Of when you go to what's that? Uh, Crusades, the guys that the the Crusaders were fighting, that major Islamic general. What's his face?
Oh, I don't
Anyway, there's
know.
the
Yeah.
major. Yeah, I can't even remember his name. But anyway, what happens was they captured 200 Knights Templar, and the Sufis are salivating. The Sufis beg the general if they may murder the Templars, and they get given permission, and the Sufis go wild and they slaughter these 200. So understand that the idea that the Sufis are just all spiritual, skipping through the valley, saying little chants, don't buy that. Please
Whirling
don't buy it.
dervishes, man, with their swords and their
Exactly.
daggers.
Yeah, don't buy it. The Sufis will slaughter you dead. Now, notice it says here, they say then what happened to Iblis happened. Gabriel and Michael, peace be upon them, started to cry, and they wept for a long time. Allah Most High asked them, why do you cry so profusely? And the angels answered, our Lord, we do not feel safe from your deception, from your ruse. Allah then said, you indeed are not safe from my deception.
Wow. Wait, what's the source that you're reading? I missed that part.
Um, that is a good question. It's in a Sufi text. Sorry, I just found it
Mhm.
today. It's actually in a Sufi text. I have the notes. Don't worry. I was going to post this actually on my wall. I was going to post this in my community tab, but this is a Sufi text, believe it or not.
I believe it, but
So just so you know,
you see the deception of the Christian man, right? The one who apostatized. You see, he's like, "Oh yeah, just go ahead,
yeah,
you're fine, run away." And then you see
sure,
that even
sure.
the angels in this reference don't even trust Allah, and Allah's like, "Yeah, you probably shouldn't trust me."
Exactly. Now, is that that's a law, right? That's a law.
Hmm.
That's a law for you. So okay. So to start winding down slightly, um, so this is the angel Metatron from the book of Enoch, and this is all Arabic, by the way. So because Metatron has made his way, the book of Enoch has made its way into Islam of all things, because Islam is entirely unique, comes from heaven, and has no antecedents from anything written before. Just so you know. So in Jewish Apocrypha and early Kabbalah, Metatron is the name that Enoch received after his transformation into an angel. And Metatron is mediated between Allah and, sorry,
Israel.
between God and Israel.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Metatron is the main angel, the guy who intermediates between, see, Muhammad founds, well, the nation of Islam, right?
Right.
And Allah. So understand. So you might say that there's a parallel here too, something of a parallel here. But in Islamic tradition, he's known as Mitatrun, the angel of the veil. The veil is where the Sufis have to pierce the veil. They have to go through the veil, right, and then enter into the blah blah blah.
Right.
Here, Metatron is depicted in the Daqaiq Halaqaiq, the degrees of truths, by blah blah blah. Now, a couple of things, and I'll jump. Final slide, I think, and then I'll jump into something else. So notice that there are seven witnesses. Okay, so the book of Al-Qasai was used by the Ebionites, right? The Essenes, the Nazarenes, and of course the Alkacites, who based their origin on it. But notice the same book of Alkasai was used by the Ebionites, was used by the Essenes, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls, or was it the Nag Hammadi? Can't remember.
Yeah.
As well as the Nazarenes. So and other sects too used the book of Al-Kasai. And then oddly enough, this guy called Mani, his father joined the Al-Qasai when he was 4, and he stayed with them for 20 years before he went off, took some of the ideas and went and made his own thing.
Hmm.
And Mani is said to be the precursor to Muhammad, from according to Mal's work and Bala's work. This is where Mo came from. Now, notice ritual ablution or ghusl is part of the Islamic practice after sexual intercourse.
Hmm.
Okay. Now, sexual desire in Al-Qasai is presented as wickedness, but a sin that is cured through baptism. Now, notice, as I said, some of the Islamic scholars says no, it's not baptism; it was washing. Ritual ablution is part of the Islamic practice after sex. Again, your thoughts?
Well, as you're talking about those, yes, obviously there's a very tight connection between this teaching and the teachings of Islam. But I feel like you're helping the Muslims right now, because Christians, we always ask them, hey, where is this original Injil? Because most of them don't fully accept our New Testament Gospels as being it, and I think you're giving them information. You're giving them secrets, Lloyd, on where they can find the original Injils from.
Injil.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But then what they're going to have to do is say and show and demonstrate how these books are more apostolic, earlier, more truthful to the historical nature of the early Christian movement and of Jesus' teachings.
Yeah.
And I
So
have a
understand when
feeling
we
these are
speak.
going to be very late sources, correct, relative to the New Testament, right?
Just run it past me again, please. I just
So
misunderstood you.
these
Sorry.
books that you're making reference to, these are pretty late sources, right?
Relative to the New Testament,
Yeah.
yes. So this one,
Okay.
Al-Qasai, though, dates to the early second century, the first 20
Okay.
years
So
of the
it's
second century.
fairly early. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Hmm.
very early. Yeah. Of course, it has inspired other sources. Now, I have stated, and I believe this to be true at this point, that remember when they said people of the book, they're not just mentioning Jews and Christians, they're also mentioning a certain Gnostic sect that had their own book, which was heretical, totally
Hmm.
heretical,
Yeah.
right? And we know that this corrupted book of Matthew was part of that collection. Okay, they wrote numerous books. They wrote their own books. There's records of that. I'll get into that another time. But also, they, I believe that the Quran, when they mention the Injil, they are talking about the Gnostic Gospels, because why does it have like 247 stories or whatever that's in the Quran, and like 246 of them are all Gnostic stories,
Right. Exactly.
right?
That's really good.
So it's so that's so that I'll finish here on this slide, and then I'll jump to something else just briefly. So Al-Kasai is mentioned in the Mani Codex, CMC 9499, and it's called Concerning the Origin of His Body. Now, it is taken by scholars generally to mean that the church is the body of Christ. So Mani's church is the body of Mani, right? However, there's another way to interpret that, and that is concerning the origin of his body. This is from the Shir Kama. One can go concerning the measurements of the body, because it's the name, the title is very similar to what we saw earlier in the Jewish Shir Kama, in the mythical texts of theirs.
Hmm.
And Mani is supposed to come from a Baptist sect. Okay. Now, interestingly, Mani joins the Al Qaeda when he's 4 years old, while his father was a convert to the what's called in Islam, it's called the Muqtasila. They're known as the Muqtasila, the practitioners of ablution. The Muslims call them not baptizers, but practitioners of ablution, those who wash themselves. Also known as, interestingly, the Catharioi. And this has a direct link, as far as I can tell, as far as I can see, to the Cathars, the Cathar heresy in Europe.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'll stop here on this slide and I'll jump to something else. But any questions so far?
I've been highlighting a whole bunch of questions. I don't know how much time you have. Um,
Let's take some questions, and I can, if there's time, I'll jump into something else. But
okay.
what does the audience have to say? What are their thoughts? I mean, am I making sense? Do I sound like I'm a rambling lunatic?
You do sound like a rambling lunatic, but we still love you for that.
Okay.
All
Hopefully,
right.
an accurate rambling lunatic, though.
No, I'm just kidding. So I'm just going to go through in chronological order to where I see where I highlighted some things. So Yahya says Muhammad has achieved what no man has ever done. 20 years transformed Bedouins, Arabs, tribal society into an empire. Do you have anything you'd like to say to that, Lloyd?
I'd say the Romans did that too, and much better.
Right, and the Mongols actually did a way better job than them as well. So you should probably follow whatever Mongol religion that there is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah. If
Europeans did it.
that's
The
right,
Europeans did it.
I mean, come on,
The Americans did it.
that's really stupid. Not to mention the Byzantines and the Persians were at war with one another during the time of the conquest. So the Byzantines and um, the Persians were completely exhausted, and so Islam just
Yeah,
so happened to be able to step up and do that.
should be
By the
noted that.
way, how does
Yeah,
that prove that anything's from God? Like seriously, how does that prove that it's from God? It just proves that people are at war at all times, and sometimes people win. It happens
it should be
over.
noted. Now, notice I want to say about his word empire. Islam is not a religion. I need you guys to understand this. Islam is a deen. It is
Hmm.
not a religion. It is a socio-political system. So please, everyone, remember this. Okay, this is only going to be two very short slides, 1.5 slides. Deen embodies perspectives on existence, life, society, the socio-political system, right? And Islam emerges as a complete and competing ideology and a system of life and society, a political, ideological system. Thus, Islam emerges as, according to Muslims, a superior ideology towering over other isms, capitalism, you know, and the resultant socio-political systems. It is a political framework for managing mankind's affairs.
Hmm.
Islam is not a religion; it's a deen, right? It's now linguistic meaning. The famous classical Arab dictionaries Al Qamus Al Muhit and the Lisan al Arab. Lisan al Arab is 20 volumes, the most famous Islamic dictionary. State there are four meanings. Both of them state there are four meanings of deen from the plural adyan, which derives from the root dana. One, the first meaning is subjugation and dominance, right? So deen means to subjugate and to dominate. It means ownership, government, administrative, legislative authority. Now, understand government is secular, government is force, government is war, government is propaganda. Islam is a deen, understand? Administrative, legislative. The second meaning of deen is obedience and bondage, subordination and dominance under the power of others. The third meaning is rules and regulations, which includes doctrine, ideology, tradition, and notice here it says or religion. Religion is 10th. If you want to count it, depends. It's 14th if you count it one way, and it's 10th if you count it another. But religion is only 10th in the list of priorities of what a deen is. Religion, as a religion, Islam, religion is only 10th in its list of priorities at best. Understand, it is way on the bottom of the pile.
Hmm. Well, and it's more
So
so
understand,
used. It's more so used to feed into the political system, right? It's not
correct.
the political system is not necessarily a derivative of the religion. It's more so that the religion is used to feed into the political system. And when you read the
Yeah, so
Quran or
here,
other sources, you see.
Yeah,
that it's more about domination, exactly what you said there, and
correct.
subsig
And al-din, notice it says here, deen does not mean religion; it means obedience.
mhm.
Right. Ben Beal says, "What Christian tradition?" I am a, I'm a, I'm an agnostic. Uh, let me try and get this right. I'm a dyslexic, agnostic, insomniac. So I lie awake all night wondering if there really is a dog.
All right. Is that the fullest extent of your answer?
Yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
so yeah, that's uh yeah. Just so I always get asked this question, and I've answered it
Mhm,
many times, and everyone goes, "Lloyd never says what he is." It's like I grew up in the Anglican Church. Okay,
mhm,
please inscribe that on your foreheads because I've had people tell me some really weird things. I grew up in the Anglican Church. I've been a Anglican my entire life. I've had Anglican priests in the family and very senior levels. So yeah, that's where I grew up. Uh, Although I do find myself disagreeing with certain tenets of I don't like what's happening in the Protestant churches. I don't like what I see some of the time. For instance, there's the massive accusation against, accurately so, against the Catholic Church for failing to deal with child
mhm.
molestation within the Catholic Church. However, it should be noted that the figures that I've seen show that this is even worse inside the Protestant churches. Now, Protestants will take time out to beat the Catholic Church over the head with, "Oh, you guys are pedos," but you know what? It's actually even worse in the Protestant churches. The figures are at least as bad. And of course, we don't want to talk about that, right? Because only the RCC is bad. Protestants, oh, we're all good. That's propaganda. That is lies and deceit. And I'm sorry, but you know what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Right.
So
And
if
we
the
shouldn't
RCC is, yeah, sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
just going to say we shouldn't make a judgment call based on how fallible humans act within any particular ideology. What we should be looking at is the facts on the ground in terms of apostolic succession, alignment with the Bible and biblical teachings and things like that. So you're right. It is propaganda. If you're just going to start, mudslinging, it's like, yes, I can mudsling at you too, but that doesn't actually get you to any level of truthfulness. So
Yeah,
thank you for answering that,
yeah.
sir.
Welcome. Michael Knight says that's funny because Dean in Hebrew. Now, look, you must understand that Islam has borrowed. That's a very polite word. They've borrowed a lot of stuff from the Hebrew. Okay, the Sharia, Islamic Sharia is, look. People hate the Jews because of the Talmud, the evil Talmud. Insert hysteria here.
Mhm.
Okay, now, of course, people are okay because the Sharia is literally the Talmud of Islam. They've ripped it off. It's the identical copy. No, it's not. It is in many cases the inversion of the Talmud. They've inverted that law. Okay, quite literally, they've turned it upside down. So understand, if it's not okay for the Jews to have a Talmud that exegetes the Torah, then why is it okay for the Muslims to have a Sharia that exegetes the Quran, the Quran? All right. So understand Islam. So yeah. And also, don't forget, Islam might use certain words. It does not necessarily mean them the same way. Okay. The Talmud's a story I can talk about another time, and this has led to lots of grief and conflict. And I will say that 99.7999% of the people I've spoken about the Talmud are idiots and really should shut up. And I'm being blunt. I am
Yeah,
being
and
blunt.
you and I have done probably 3 or 4 different videos on that topic. So if they want to search your channel for
Yeah.
that, they can learn a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, should we end here, or should I go on a little bit for a few more minutes just to bring up a few other things that might be
That's
of
up to you,
relevance,
man.
just to show?
I've got all the time in the world, so it's kind of up to you, however long you want to go.
Yeah. Look, I mean, what does the audience think? Should I go on for a few minutes and just talk about some other things? So we've spoken about one of the root sources of Gnosticism. There's actually some more revelations there, but again, that was just an introduction. I have a ton of stuff, dude. I'm going to be hundreds of slides at the end of this. I just went through a few.
See if I see anything.
Michael Knight, your church fathers and emperors used legislation and Bible for their empire. I don't want to be rude to people arbitrarily on the channel, but did this guy get enough oxygen at birth?
You'd have to ask his doctors that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, but moving on. I'm not here to discuss that, but yeah, legislation from the Bible does not legislate. Christianity is not a religion of law. Islam is a religion of law. Judaism is a religion of law. However, that concept of law within the Talmud, for instance, within the Jews, has changed significantly over time. And in fact, one of the tenets within the Jewish understanding was that the law had to become more just as people became more civilized, as the word of God spread and the understanding of God's moral law became more entrenched within society, we would be more just and we would move towards more justice and less brutality. For instance, eye for an eye does not literally mean that within the Jewish law. They don't do that. Okay, that actually doesn't exist. However, within Islam, it certainly does. Okay, stoning still exists within Islam because they're practicing that rigidly. And if Sharia ever becomes the law of the land, you're going to go back to what ISIS was doing, to what the Taliban does, because that's
Mhm.
the law. This is not happening in Israel because they've interpreted, they said, no, no, that's barbaric. We need to move away from that towards greater justice. Christianity, if you're a Christian, you're an idiot because Christianity is not a religion of law. The Bible defines in the Old Testament the moral law, the civil law, the ceremonial law. Okay? You are referring to the civil law. And if you think Jesus brought civil law, you're dumb.
100%. Really quickly, guys, if you want to research a little bit more about the Christian moral codes, Inspiring Philosophy did a really, really, really good video on this particular topic. We could not cover this in the amount of time necessary. So just go ahead and click that link,
Yeah.
and that will explain to you that.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, we've spoken about the law of Noah before. Again,
Mhm.
something else that people get hysterical about, and that actually clarifies a lot of this. It actually brings out a lot of that. So the laws of Noah and the development of the law, the moral law, natural law, that accounts for that there. Okay, so I will briefly do one or two small things, and then we can call it a day. Are there still more questions that?
I've got probably
Sure.
6 or 7 more
Go ahead.
questions highlighted.
Okay,
I was
so
just going to
shoot
kind of
some questions. Shoot some questions. Let's do that.
let's see here. So a lot of
I'll
these are
stop
going to be
sharing in the
from our
meantime.
favorite friend Yaya.
Oh my God.
So ritual of Wurdu. Sorry, I'm going to add myself in back here. Ritual Wurdu and Gusul is part of faith and its continual actions of the Abrahamic teachings. So you say Abrahamic teachings, Yaya. Can you please cite for me where Abraham mentioned any of these ritual washings?
Don't forget, it's what they claim is the original proto-Islam, the original supposed proto-Islam, the monotheism, the early form of monotheism that was perfected under Muhammad. So that's the claim. This is the, again, just like you have the Isa, their Abraham is not the biblical Abraham.
Right. No, exactly. Michael Knight says Jacob. We were talking about Gabriel, right, choking out Muhammad. It says Jacob, Israel, right, choked out God in the Bible via rear naked choke. I know you're just being facetious here, Michael. No, he didn't, and there's a much deeper meaning behind what is going on here, and a little bit of it has to do with free will, which apparently you guys don't have in Islam.
Yeah, but
So
I did say there was jujitsu. I did say there was early jujitsu in the, it's
there was no for sure. Um, I love this one. Yeah, yeah, dude. We've literally had a debate on this exact topic. So Jesus came not to fulfill the law only, but to keep it. I'm not even sure, dude. You got to learn how to write better. Remove a dot will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus came to fulfill the law. When something is fulfilled, Lloyd,
it's finished
it's finished. So if we're
completely.
talking covenantal, contractual language, we are
The
talking about
covenant,
once
the
one
contract is
contract
done,
is completed, then we bring in and we usher in a new contract to where
which is called the New Testament, the New Covenant, the
isn't
New
that
Contract,
weird
the
how
New
it kind
Testament.
of works out that way? So that's right, way over his head. But that's
Well, look,
pretty simple to explain.
I should mention that, look, I have covered this in depth on my channel, and I'm happy to come back and do further discussions. Guys, please subscribe to AT. And of course, I've also been doing very interesting discussions with Thunderous One, so please check out his channel on YouTube.
Mhm.
Give him a sub as well. Very interesting questions. I mean, the guy's brilliant, and I'll be bringing him on to talk about atheism. That's really his thing, and some other subjects we'll be discussing. You might want to get him on, possibly atheism.
Yeah,
I think
that'd
it's
be
very
cool. No,
interesting.
absolutely.
Interesting. He asks such great questions. So, briefly speaking, lying is not only permissible in Islam, it is obligatory. Okay, it is part of the Sharia. It is obligatory to lie. It is not an option. Muslims must do it. Dawah requires lying. Right
Mhm.
now, when a Muslim is attempting to, shall we say, create harmony, to bring peace, to resolve a dispute, remember we disagree. this is a dispute, there's a disagreement. And to resolve a disagreement, Muslims are allowed to lie, often obligatory given the nature of the conflict made defending the Quran, defending Islam. It is permissible and, in fact, obligatory for them to lie. But this is not considered a lie. A lie that is told for the purposes of creating harmony is not considered a lie. It is considered righteous and
Mhm.
it earns reward from Allah under the doctrine of commanding the right and forbidding the wrong. But understand there's an entire doctrine of lying. Now, again, we must get away. Look, if you say the word taqiyya, I'm going to come to your house and personally slap you. Okay? Forget about taqiyya, please. It's a very there are two forms of taqiyya. Everyone gets very confused about this, and Muslims love to point it out because they can justify it by saying, well, but if you have to lie to protect a life, because that is something they will willingly, it's a willing sacrifice. It's called, the CIA would you call it, a limited hangout. They're willing to sacrifice, to dangle that, to capture your attention and distract you from what's important, what's really relevant. Taqiyya is obviously lying for the purposes of saving yourself. Granted, we can grant it that. That's because Muslims, being the murderous people they were murdering the Shias if they claimed to be Shia, so the Shia had to develop it. And they'll say, but it's a Shia practice. Well, yes, it's actually called taqiyya by Sunni scholars as well. The proper name within Sunni Islam is mudarat. It actually has a name. It's exactly the same thing, just a different name, but let's call it taqiyya. We all know what it is. They do too. They use it. Secondly, it has a second definition, the one you don't know, which is tactical deception for the purposes of spreading Islam. Okay, that's the other definition that they just casually forget. I have no idea why they would do that. Third, the most important form of deceit in Islam is called hiyal. Hiyal is the basis for all of their lying. It is, look, you know that the Eskimos have like 20 words for snow.
Mhm.
Islam has like 15 words for lying.
It's that important,
Okay.
isn't it?
Then, and yes, and the final point is that they will go, but Paul said, when I was amongst the Jews, I did like the Jews, and when I was with the Romans, I did like the Romans, because the saying goes, when in Rome, do what the Romans do.
Mhm.
Okay, that is not an instruction to lie. Now, they will take one verse and try and say, well, here is a lesson in 4,000 words on how to lie. Well, actually, no, it's just one little verse, 15 words in the thing, maybe. And it just says, when I was talking to Jews, I was a, because he was a Jew, like, surprise, surprise, he was able to relate to them as a Jew. And with Christians, he could relate to them as a Christian, right? However, there's no book in the Bible that teaches lying. There's no chapter in the book in the Bible that teaches lying, how to lie, when to lie, who to lie to, specific strategies for lying, different kinds of lying. So they take one verse and try to pretend. However, you can find numerous examples of Muhammad and his companions lying, Allah lying, and then you can go into the secondary literature and the Sharia, which is very, very detailed, and it has whole chapters, whole books, literal books, dozens and dozens and dozens of pages teaching you specifically how to lie.
Hmm.
Understand? There's a big difference there. All up to you, At.
Seems really important, that this lying business.
No,
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
Jesus was not lying. You simply are dumber than a bag of hammers, dude. That's the problem.
yeah. So, yeah, yeah. Again, buddy, listen. Look into my eyes here. Pay attention. Okay. Um, he did not come to abolish the law. We already mentioned this. He came to fulfill.
Fulfill it.
Fulfill. I want you to check Google what fulfill means. Okay? It's that simple. Stop being willfully ignorant. Like I'm kind to people because I assume they might not know something. You've been corrected on this dozens of times by myself, and I can't imagine how many times you've been corrected on this at Speaker's Corner. Stop. Stop. It's
I mean,
disingenuous and it's you are lying right now. Yeah, yeah, for pretending
you
that it
saw the
means something
video.
that it doesn't.
You saw the video where even his own people says, "Yeah, stop doing what you're doing. Please come to Islam." They didn't even consider him a Muslim. He's an apostate.
Yeah. No,
So
100%.
yeah.
Um
For any question, the further questions you have?
yeah, so Ben Beal, do you know of him, Lloyd?
I've never. So
Okay.
my apologies. Uh,
He's pretty well known at Speaker's Corner, although he has retired. He would love to have you on his channel. So there
okay.
you go.
Well, look, I'd rather come and discuss with you now. Understand that. Okay. So Ben, good to meet you. Thank you for that. I'll be happy to discuss with you. Um, now, please do understand that I do have certain. I have invited every single Muslim that ever comments on my channel. I say, hey, you're a big mouth. You know a lot. You're clearly a genius. Please come on my channel and let us talk, not debate, just talk about the Sharia. I will open the books, I will give you copies in advance, and we'll just go through various rulings, like on apostasy, the ruling on marriage with young girls and what you can do with them or not do with them. We'll just read through jihad, we'll read through the chapters, what the major scholars of Islam say. Now, in 2 years, how many have accepted my invitation, AT?
To my knowledge, it would be well, accepted your invitation. Several have accepted your invitation. Um, to my
Then what did they
knowledge,
do?
zero of them have actually followed through with your invitation. So, in terms of on the ground discussions that or debates that you've been able to have with Muslims on this topic, not a soul.
Not one. I have invited all and sundry. They refuse. Understand, it is illegal for a Muslim to discuss the Sharia for two reasons. One, Sharia is a secret. It is treason for them to reveal a secret or a weakness of Islam. So it is treason for them, and they could be punished by death, or there could be some severe penalty or ostracism or some kind of punishment for them. Two, Sharia is. Did I just remember if we lose the second point? Two, they are not allowed to reveal Sharia to someone who does not wish to use it in his life, i.e., become a Muslim. So they cannot reveal it to someone who would use it for what they consider an incorrect purpose. That would be to critique it.
Mhm.
So these are two prohibitions against it. So unfortunately, it is illegal. It is highly illegal for a Muslim to discuss it and to reveal it. It would reveal too much about Islam. It clarifies all of the confusion because the Quran verses that contradict each other, the hadith that contradict each other, that Muslims use to do this merry-go-round, this spinning around, going around the bush. The Sharia stops that dead in its tracks. It is black and white, clear, unambiguous. They cannot allow this. Understand? So now next, debate is a format going back to the early 9th century within Islam. It's called Adab al-Jadal. Now it's got various names. I'm not going to get into the details here, but debate is a form of rhetoric-based deception. It is a deliberate form of deception. In fact, it falls under a technique of war, and thus falls under propaganda. Okay, I've discussed this in depth on my channel. Thus, it is propaganda. It is a tactic of war. It is propaganda, and also we would have, for instance, the concept of dialectic within the Western view, which is the search for the truth, looking at the facts and trying to assess the truth. Islam does not have the same concept. It only allows it to a very, very small degree, but where it would introduce doubt, doubt is illegal. It is not permitted, and anything that would cause doubt or thinking about things that might cause doubt is not permitted, so therefore they're not allowed to. In fact, philosophy is illegal to Muslims. Lay Muslims, it is illegal for them to study philosophy within the Sharia law. And then it is heuristic. It is not dialectic, it is heuristic. Heuristic is a tactic or a technique utilized to, okay, so Adab al-Jadal is basically not to find the truth, it is to win the argument, to persuade. Okay? So heuristic is designed to destroy the opponent or destroy the argument, but not to find the truth. Again, these are the definitions of this.
Mhm.
So understand, so when you debate, they have a specific method that is at this point about going back to the 800s. So at this point, they've got a 1200-year-old method, which is designed specifically to be dishonest and deceptive. So therefore, there's a difficulty there, and they're not allowed to talk about the subject. They're not allowed to broach it. So that is always an issue. So they are forced to lie. Unfortunately, Islam forces Muslims to lie. So I'm
Mhm.
happy to come in and talk about it in depth, and you will see the parallels with the Quran and the Hadith. But understand, Quran's abrogated, Hadith are abrogated. They both abrogate each other, right? The where this mess is sorted out is in the Sharia.
Right, and
I'll
one thing
pause
I
there, but I'll be
use,
happy to go.
yeah, but one thing I use a lot, like with you, is the explanatory power. Right, you just explained what most of us probably wouldn't have known without you explaining it, because we engage with Muslims over and over again in comment sections and debate and dialogue and stuff like that, and we will present facts that are unrefutable, right? And yet they'll sit there with a straight face and with a lot of passion and just somehow use some sort of logical fallacy to get
Yeah,
around
correct.
answering the question.
No,
Um,
now that
but
artifice, that
yeah,
method of answering falls under one of the sciences of Islam. It's under the science of rhetoric. Both of these, Adab al-Jadal falls under the Ilm al-Badi, which is the science of rhetoric, which falls into the science of rhetoric. Ilm al-Badi is the science of, it's not the science of rhetoric, it's the science of, gosh, there's a word for it, but it's not exaggeration, but it's a word like that. The science
hmm
of artifice. It's the science of of making your speech flowery, of embellishing your speech, of using
There you go. Yeah,
artifice, which is
embellishment. Yeah.
deception.
Hmm.
Embellishment and artifice. Understand they've got an entire science for it.
Hmm.
Right. So understand. So these things hopefully explain the experience that you have with Muslims, but they actually have names for this, and they teach this as sciences.
Right. And what's most disturbing to me is
Mm.
if I am indoctrinated into any kind of ideology that teaches me not to explain truth, not to find truth, not to seek truth, then implicitly that's demonstrating that what I am doing is lying and what I am following is untrue and therefore a lie. So if I recognize that, why on earth would I keep doing it? It's very special needs of people to do that. I still can't wrap that around my head how these people can look themselves in the mirror and go like, "Oh, I'm totally following the truth. This is what I should be doing." You know you're lying. You know you're not telling the truth. Walk
Yep.
away. Like, come on. Do you not believe in heaven? Do you not believe in hell? Do you really think that if you lie,
Well,
that somehow God is going to reward you for telling a lie that you know is untrue?
yes, 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 exactly. Because two of the major fund there are six major foundations. Just like there's five pillars of Islam, there are six pillars of the Sharia. Two of those pillars are that necessity allows you to break every rule. It's
Mhm.
actually got an Arabic name. I don't have it. I can bring it up. I can show you. It's okay. But basically, out of necessity, you can violate every Islamic tenet, and it's not tenant. A tenant is someone who lives in your house. A tenet is, a point. Whereas, and also the second is that the ends justify the means. The
Mhm.
ends. Those are two of the major foundational principles of Islam, of the Sharia.
Right. Perfect. All right.
So
Moving on to a couple. How much more time do you have? I don't want to keep you too long.
let's give it like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and call it
Okay.
today.
Not much longer. Okay.
Yeah.
So Islam. Thank you, Yahya, for this. These are always fun talking points. Islam is a complete way of life and obedience to what God want us human to be. Do you have anything you'd like to
Ask
say? I've
him
got a
to
lot to say, but
look. We all know this, but understand this is a euphemism. It's this is just the vaguest 92,000-foot view of Sharia.
Mhm.
What he will never show you, he will never go to an actual authoritative Sharia manual, right? Sharia and fiqh, the two are separate and distinct, but they generally just called Sharia law. Fine. And he's not going to show you the actual ruling on apostasy, for instance, or the ruling on jihad, or the ruling on diddling little girls, which is perfectly legal. There is no lower age limit for a 50 or 40 or 20 or 30-year-old man to diddle a child in the cradle. That is perfectly legal in Islam. It is totally 100% legal.
right.
Okay, so ask Yahya why they don't show you, because they realize if they must show you the actual law, if they actually expose it to you,
Mhm.
you're gonna cringe in horror at it.
Right.
You'll throw up on yourself in
Right.
disgust. So
Yeah.
therefore, they have to give you all these. Remember now, understand he's using artifice and the embellishment of speech. It's the
Hmm.
ilm al-badi.
Yeah. He's not gonna mention anything. So there's your challenge, Yahya, and a boss. I see you out there as well. Show us what Sharia manual we follow. Right. Show us. Go ahead. And I'm going to guarantee you they're like, I don't follow Sharia. I follow the Quran.
Quran only.
Okay.
They become Quran
Great.
only Muslims
Yeah,
like that.
exactly. Exactly. So I'm just going to point out a little bit of the absurdities of this particular statement. Okay. So obedience in the way of God. So, yeah, it's so important to you, your bathroom rituals. That's how important. So I need to follow a religion that tells me which foot to step into the bathroom with at what particular time. It's very important, right? Because otherwise, Satan is going to mess with my bowels. Same thing with how many times I should wipe myself. Should it be an odd number of smooth stones or an even number of smooth stones? As a Christian, we are lost on how we should do any of this kinds of stuff. Like, come on, dude, it's a terrible argument, right? If it had actual logical things to promote to people, maybe, but it's got some really, really absurd things in the laws that we need to share. Not to mention, like you need to sniff water up your nose every single morning. Do you know why that is, Lloyd? Why you need to sniff water up your nose?
Satan's hiding in your nose, right? You got to get him out.
I mean, that should be enough. That should be enough to take anyone away from Islam. The Satan's hiding in your nose, just so you know. You can't see him, you can't feel him, can't even smell him apparently. But he's there. Trust us. So you
Yeah.
have to snort
Yeah,
like.
yeah. If you and your fellow Mohammedans are so proud of the perfect law. Remember, Sharia for Britain, right? You see all those posters, Sharia for Britain, all the protests. If
Hmm.
you are so proud of that law, why are you too embarrassed and too afraid and too chicken? Okay, because you're a chicken, you're a coward. You will never meet me. To come on, and we will just open the books and read them together and discuss them. Everyone's. I don't need a debate. We just need to read through them together, and we can talk about what's in them.
There you go.
These are from the greatest scholars in Islam to ever live.
Mhm.
Your four perfect scholars, right? Your four ultimate scholars, right? Your mujtahids mutlaq, the greatest scholar to ever live, who is the one above them, just below Muhammad, right? Um, your hujjat, okay? You've got your hujjat, you've got your mujtahids mutlaq, then you've got your Sheikh al-Islam, and
Hmm.
then you've got all the random wannabes that come after them. But those guys, those 30 guys under Mo, they are the absolute best at scholarship that Islam has ever produced. Why are you better than them? Because you're not,
Yeah, but they
right?
think they are, or at least they
But if
pretend
you
that
if
they
you're
think
so
they
proud
are.
of it, yeah, if you're so proud of the Sharia, why are you, or every single one of you, literally every one of you, in 2 years, not one of you has had enough of these to come and meet me.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Offers on the table, y'all.
Yeah,
We'll take these questions or kind of
perfect.
statements here, and maybe
Sure,
one more thing I did want to cover, but it'll be fairly
sure.
brief, and then we'll let Lloyd go. It's kind of getting late for you, brother.
Yeah, yeah.
Aleko says the hardest thing for people to do is admit that they have been wrong all their lives. I agree, 100%. And because they can't drop their pride, and then they continue to walk in the dark or walk in darkness. I agree. So this is my hope and prayer for Muslims. I'm sure Lloyd, you would second this. Wake up, guys. Wake up. It makes
So
no
look,
sense. Yeah.
Abbas Aga follows the source of Sharia. You know what? I eat the source of bread. I eat raw flour and raw butter. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You see, because who needs bread when you've got dried flour and butter? You can just chew on the butter and then just, I don't know, just like take the flour and smear it in your face and hope it sucks in through osmosis.
It might actually do that. You just got to take a shower a little bit, and it
See,
and it
so
should be
so what
fine.
happens is that, look, Abbas Aga, you guys all have a script. We all know exactly. You've all been trained to say exactly the same thing. All of you suddenly become Quran only. Please, please, please be original. Okay, you're just doing copy paste right now.
Hmm.
So if any Sharia manual opposed to it, then I will leave that man. So if any the Quran's abrogated. The Quran abrogates itself. You need to abandon the Quran because the Quran abrogates. The Quran contradicts itself, right? That's why there's
Hmm.
abrogation. So
Hmm.
please, please, you are an amateur. Okay, just you're an amateur. Understand? So if any Sharia manual, blah, you don't have the right. You are at the lowest level of knowledge in Islam. You're at the, come on, what are the four levels? Come on, Abbas, can you tell us? Yeah, because you don't know.
Hmm.
Okay, so you're at the very lowest level of knowledge in Islam. Okay, the Ibara, the Ishara, the Taif, the Haqqaiq. You're at the very lowest level. The only sources you have access to is the Quran and some Hadith. You're not even technically allowed to read the tafsir by yourself. So please, please. Islam is very traditional and extremely authoritative. And I know this better than you do. So really, those stories, as people are learning this stuff, doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Sorry,
Right.
up to you again.
No, it's good. So, I mean, a boss says that you're saying that I, as a Muslim, cannot disagree with the imams. No, look, you can disagree. Obviously, you are disagreeing, and you have disagreed in the past, at least with your words. Whether or not you disagree with it in your heart, I have no idea. However, go ahead and do that in a perfect Sharia compliant land. Go ahead.
Go to Saudi Arabia. Go to Saudi Arabia and go tell the imam he's talking out of his bum.
Mhm.
And let's see how long you live. Try
Right.
that.
So a lot
Send
of
us the video.
a lot of westernized Muslims think that because they can do that. They get away with it. They're not going to get hurt. And by
Look, he's
taking the
allowed to.
yeah. Yeah.
He's allowed to lie. I mean, he's allowed to lie. And besides, the four mujtahids mutlaq are the infallible scholars, technically the absolute scholars, but they're infallible,
Mhm.
and there is no argument against them. I mean, it's a story. Look, it's just a script. They all say the very. Go ask any other guy; he will give you literally word for word the same script the boss just did. There's nothing original about it.
Right. One last thing that I will say before I turn it over to you, Lloyd, to kind of close this out here, brother. So one of the general things that we're getting from Muslims, specifically Yahya over here barking, saying how evil the Bible is, etc., etc. Jesus was racist, whatever else he has to say, which is the script that's been debunked on him 1,000 times. The 6 pillars of faith. Okay. two of which you are breaking. You are calling Jesus racist. You are saying all kinds of horrible things, while at the same time you're using the Bible to try to refute the Bible. Figure that one out, anybody. So, number two, the second pillar of Islam: believe in all the prophets of God. 3, believe that God has revealed the books for the guidance of men.
Well, they've
Books.
only got one. They've lost all the rest, right?
No, but
I mean,
the Bible over and over and over again, and Yahya and I are actually going to have a debate on this. And the more I research it, the more I'm convinced that the Quran that you appeal to, you Quran only Muslims, affirms the authenticity, preservation, and authority of the Bible over and over and over again, indicating that it is explicitly saying that it is from God Himself. And we know that God's words cannot be changed. So the Bible that we have, according to your Quran, is exactly the words of Allah, and that they are exactly preserved and nobody
well,
can change those words. So when you're
I mean,
sitting here
this is
throwing it under the bus, you're throwing the third pillar right underneath the bus.
those are
So
just Dawa scripts.
congratulations
I mean,
for your apostasy.
those are just Dawa scripts, right? And in fact, I think the Quran, for the most part, affirms the Gnostic Gospels, various pseudo-biblical Gospels, because the Quran is filled with pseudo-biblical stories and
Yeah.
has numerous pseudo-biblical parallels. So hopefully that was instructive, everyone. I spoke about the
No, it
Sharia at the
was.
end, and I spoke about. So hopefully, so what did you get out of this session besides the fact that Yahya remains an idiot?
That was the main point. But no, what I've really gathered from this, and what I'm interested in seeing from you for next year, is how you're going to develop and show the sources. Like you showed a lot of the sources, but I'm going to be interested in doing the research on the dating of the sources, the authenticity of the sources, and how they. You're basically, like I said, you're doing the homework for the Muslims. You are reconstructing what Muhammad thought was the Injil, what Muhammad thought was the Torah. Now, it's obviously not what you and I believe is the Gospels, like New Testament, Old Testament. We don't see any of these sources um, as being the same thing that Muhammad's talking about, but these Gnostic influential sources. Now, that makes sense. But so, Muslims, this is your job. What I want you guys to do is I want you to do the homework for Lloyd, figure out where these sources come from, who wrote them, where they are, and how that should really be the Injil and the Torah and the Zabur, right? So that's what we want. We've been asking Muslims for centuries, show us what you think are the books, because your book does not align with our book. Case closed.
Mm-hmm. No, their claims about the Christian books do not align with what's actually in the books. So they've got heretical versions of those, and there were numerous of those floating
Hmm.
around back in the day.
Right.
So there might be some overlap and some occasional parallel, but most of the time they are referencing Gnostic. Don't forget, Muhammad had no exposure to an actual New Testament. The New Testament in Arabic that we know of, the most authentic one, is from the year 867, right?
Right.
And Jesus, in that Arabic New Testament gospel from the Sinai, is called Yeshua, not Isa.
Hmm. Wonder where all that came from. Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
So yeah, thanks guys. That's it from me. I hope that was helpful and useful. And yeah, maybe we can always do another follow up at some other time. But thank you.
yeah. Absolutely, guys. Hey, thank you so much for watching. And I know we're on Lloyd's channel here in a little bit as well. So thank you, Lloyd, for everything that you've done for us. Thank you, audience, for watching. God bless you all. We love you. See ya.